June 1859. 5 warships, 70 cannons, over 2,000 British troops on one side of a narrow strait, hundreds of American soldiers, and 14 cannons on the other. Two of the most powerful nations on Earth standing eye to eye on a tiny, mostly forgotten Pacific island, one single order away from war. And the whole thing started over a pig. The island itself was barely 55 square miles, 19 miles long, 7 miles wide. No gold, no cities, nothing especially valuable sitting on top of it. What made it worth fighting over was underneath, the water around it. Whoever controlled these islands controlled the straits connecting the open Pacific to the inland waterways of both British Columbia and the American Northwest. In an age when navies still decided everything, a patch of sheep pasture like this one was strategically priceless, even if nobody living there was rich. Go back to 1846. The Hudson's Bay Treaty draws the border between the United States and British Canada along the 49th parallel, clean and simple on paper, except for one stretch, where the line was supposed to continue through the channel separating Vancouver Island from the mainland. Nobody had specified which channel. There were two. Britain read the treaty one way, claiming the eastern route. America read it the other way, claiming the western one. Both readings happened to place the exact same set of islands inside their own territory. A single ambiguous sentence, and 13 years later, it would nearly start a war. Britain moved first. The Hudson's Bay Company built a large sheep operation on San Juan Island in the early 1850s and started exporting wool, salted fish, and timber straight out of its own private harbor. Then, starting in 1858, a second group showed up. American settlers, mostly ex-miners drifting south after the Fraser River gold rush went bust further north. If you haven't seen our video on that gold rush, it's a wild story on its own, worth a watch. But on San Juan Island, these new arrivals weren't panning for gold anymore. Under America's Donation Land Claim Act, they were staking out farmland, and San Juan looked like free real estate nobody had gotten around to owning yet. For a while, the two groups actually coexisted fine. British shepherds and American farmers lived within walking distance of each other without much friction. June 15, 1859. An American settler named Lyman Cutler steps outside and finds a familiar problem rooting through his garden. A boar belonging to the Hudson's Bay Company, owned on paper by the farm's manager Charles Griffin. Not the first time. Standing there, watching it tear through his crop again while a company herdsman laughed at the whole scene, Cutler finally lost his patience. He grabbed his rifle and shot it dead, right there in his own garden. To his credit, Cutler didn't try to hide it. He walked straight over and admitted what he'd done to Griffin, even offering to pay for the animal. Griffin wanted $100. Cutler offered 10 instead. The animal had been trespassing repeatedly, eating his food for free the whole time. Griffin refused flat out and threatened to have Cutler arrested if he didn't pay in full. That should have been the end of it. A dead pig, an argument over $90. Instead, it became the spark an older argument had been waiting for. The American settlers didn't see this as a dispute about livestock anymore. They saw an opening, a chance to finally force the question of who this island really belonged to. They petitioned the U.S. Army for protection, and that petition landed on the desk of Brigadier General William S. Harney, a man already well known for his open hostility towards the British. Harney didn't wait for instructions from Washington. He acted almost immediately. July 27, 1859. Captain George Pickett lands on San Juan Island with 66 soldiers and sets up camp within sight of the Hudson's Bay Company's own wharf, a deliberate show of force right on Britain's doorstep. His men plant the flag and dig in cannon positions almost as fast as they make camp. Worth noting, this same young captain would go on, just 3 years later, to lead the infamous Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg. In the summer of 1859, though, he was just a confident officer with 66 men, about to provoke an empire. Word reaches Governor Douglas in Victoria almost immediately, and he's furious. He orders 3 Royal Navy warships to the island under Captain Geoffrey Hornby, with instructions to remove the Americans by whatever means necessary. Hornby arrives, takes one look, and decides not to act unilaterally. Pickett had already made it clear he'd fight any landing attempt. Rather than risk igniting a war on his own authority, Hornby waits for his superior, Rear Admiral Robert Baines, to arrive and make the final call himself. And while everyone waits, both sides keep escalating anyway. By August 10th, 1859, less than 2 months after one gunshot killed one pig, the numbers had become almost absurd. 461 American soldiers, backed by 14 cannons. Facing them, just offshore, 2,140 British sailors and Marines aboard 5 warships carrying 70 guns between them. A narrow stretch of water separated 2 armed forces, both under standing orders not to fire first, and neither side was willing to blink. Then, finally, Admiral Baines arrives to take direct command. He surveys the entire ridiculous scene, thousands of armed men on both sides, prepared to go to actual war over one dead pig, and simply refuses to give the order to attack. He tells Governor Douglas plainly that he will not, in his own words, involve 2 great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. By now, word has finally reached both Washington and London, and officials in both capitals are stunned. President Buchanan, wary of provoking a war with Britain while America drifts towards its own civil war, sends his most senior general, Winfield Scott, directly to the Pacific Northwest to defuse things in person. Scott negotiates face-to-face with Douglas. Both sides withdraw the bulk of their forces, leaving no more than 100 troops each until a permanent resolution can be reached. The British set up English camp on the island's north end. The Americans set up American camp on the south end. And then for the next 12 years, almost nothing dramatic happens at all. Life at both camps settled into a strict military rhythm. Reveille, drills, fatigue duty, hunting deer and quail in the surrounding woods, skating on frozen ponds in winter. Canvas tents eventually gave way to proper wooden barracks, and despite officially representing 2 rival empires, the men became something close to neighbors, visiting each other's camps, sharing whiskey, racing horses, competing in log-tossing contests through the slow winter months. One of the tensest military standoffs of the century quietly turned into one of the strangest, quietest, most oddly friendly shared postings in military history. But that 12 years of quiet friendship wasn't entirely free of cost. The Pig War is remembered as bloodless, and it's true, not one shot was ever fired between the 2 sides. But during those 12 years, roughly 16 to 20 American soldiers, 7 British Royal Marines, and at least 1 British civilian died on San Juan Island, not from combat, but from accidents, illness, exposure, and in a few documented cases, suicide. The war that made headlines for having no casualties quietly had real ones anyway. They just didn't come from the enemy anyone was watching for. Underneath it all, the actual legal question still hadn't been answered. In 1871, the US and Britain signed the Treaty of Washington, agreeing to settle the matter through neutral arbitration. Both sides picked Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany. For nearly a year, a 3-member commission reviewed arguments from both governments. In October 1972, the Kaiser ruled the boundary would run through Haro Strait, handing the entire San Juan archipelago to the United States. Britain accepted without protest. On November 25, 1972, British troops packed up, held a genuinely friendly farewell ceremony with the Americans, and sailed away for good. American soldiers moved in almost immediately to raise their flag over the newly won campsite, except when they reached the flagpole, there wasn't one. The British had quietly chopped it down and taken it with them, one last small, petty parting gesture. Proof that even in a peaceful surrender, somebody still wants the last word. Today, both camps sit inside a U.S. National Historical Park, and to this day, on American federal land, the British flag is still raised over Old English Camp, quite possibly the only place in the country where a foreign flag flies on federal soil. That original flagpole, cut down out of spite, was finally rebuilt and gifted back by Britain in 1998. 12 years, thousands of soldiers, 5 warships, 70 cannons, a handful of quiet deaths the history books forgot to headline. And when it was finally over, the only casualty anyone remembers was the one creature that started it all. A pig that never knew his death had nearly dragged 2 world powers into battle, and instead left behind the strangest, quietest, most oddly friendly standoff in military history.